Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and we're starting a new unit today. We're really talking about genetics and this scientist named Mendel. Now, you probably know a little bit about genetics already. This has to do with Punnett squares and pedigrees. I really enjoy this unit because some of the time it seems like we're solving a puzzle. So that's kind of what we're going to get into over the next couple weeks. And today specifically, we're talking about the scientist Mendel. Okay, we're going to learn about his life and why he's known as the father of genetics. So thank you so much for making it here today. And without any further ado, we'll go ahead and hop into it. So Gregor Mendel, okay, he's an Austrian monk. Austria is a country in Europe. It's pretty close to Germany. Okay, he was born in 1822 in what is now the Czech Republic. Okay, he was the son of a peasant farmer and he studied theology. Theology is like studying religions. Okay, so he was really studying religions at this time, and he was actually ordained as a priest in the order of St. Augustine. Okay, he attended the university in Vienna where he studied botany and mastered the scientific method. Botany is the study of plants, and that's going to play a really big role in his studies later on in his life. Okay, he spent 8 years working with purebred lines of peas, and before Mendel, heredity was thought to be a blending process where offsprings were seen as a dilution of their parents' traits. When he was doing this work, we didn't really know much about genetics or heredity or how it worked. It was all a mystery, but thanks to Mendel, we kind of figured a lot of that out. So here's what was understood at the time that Mendel was doing his research. Okay, heredity seemed random and unpredictable. We weren't really sure how it worked at this point. Again, this is about 200 years ago. Many traits appeared to blend in offspring, leading to the belief that a fluid-like factor governed inheritance. However, certain traits like red hair resisted blending and remained distinct. So we thought we knew what was going on, but there were a couple of outliers that weren't quite fitting into our understanding of what was going on, okay? So Gregor Mendel, he had a mentor, Abbot Knapp, and with his encouragement, Mendel studied heredity in peas. So he was looking at pea plants, okay? And he deliberately selected traits that did not seem to blend. He collected data for 9 years from 1856 to 1865. Mendel's innovative approach to track individual traits across generations rather than attempting to document every trait in plants. And this is actually a statue dedicated to him. Again, he's the father of genetics, so we like to pay a lot of tribute to him. He played a really big role in our understanding of science. Okay, so Mendel presented his findings. He's doing all this research with pea plants, and he brings his findings to the Association of Natural Research in Brno in 1865. At the time, he wasn't really given much credit for his work. Few recognized the importance of his work, and his quantitative approach was very unusual. Tracking it and doing the math and keeping up with all the traits was very unlike what all the other scientists were doing at the time. Okay, and so also it was in direct opposition to this blending theory of heredity that was the prevailing belief. Okay, but in 1866 he published his works under the name Experiments in Plant Hybridization, where he outlined his 3 principles of inheritance. And we're going to talk about those 3 principles when I see you next time. He attempted to replicate his experiments with another plant, but was unsuccessful due to the plant's asexual reproduction. His work was largely overlooked for 34 years until 1900, when 3 independent botanists rediscovered Mendel's findings. Okay? In 1868, Mendel became the abbot of his monastery, and so he got a lot of new responsibilities, and it didn't leave much time for his research. He eventually set it aside, though he remained confident that he made a significant contribution to science. Okay? Mendel passed away in 1884, and 16 years later, in 1900, his work was rediscovered by Hugo de Vries and other scientists searching for answers to the mystery of heredity. Although some aspects of his work were later critiqued, the core principle of Mendel's research remained valid. Mendel was the first botanist to use mathematics to explain his results quantitatively. He predicted these three things. He predicted the concept of genes, he predicted that genes occur in pairs, and he also predicted that one gene from each parent is present in the gametes. Okay, this is a huge deal because this really lays the groundwork for our understanding of genetics to come along. And again, he was really ahead of the game. This was 200 years ago, and it was about 30 or 40 years before other scientists started to accept his work. Okay, so Mendel chose peas. He was doing all his research with pea plants, and there's three really important reasons why he was focusing on pea plants. So one, those pea plants reproduce sexually, which is going to be really important, okay? Remember that sex cells are also known as gametes, and male and female gametes unite through a process called fertilization. Once the cell is fertilized, it's called a zygote, okay, and that develops into a seed. And we'll talk about why those plants reproducing sexually is so important later on, okay? Another reason he chose pea plants is that in peas, in these pea plants, the male and female reproductive organs are located on the same flower, okay? And that made it easy for him to control how the plants were getting fertilized. Okay, the transfer of pollen from the male organ to the female organ is known as pollination. Okay, and plants is known as its pollination. When a pollen is transferred within the same plant, it's called self-pollination. And when the pollen is transferred from one plant to another, it's called cross-pollination. Because the male and female organs are on the same flower, it was really easy for him to self-pollinate or cross-pollinate these plants. And so it made it really easy for him to test different ideas that he had. Okay, he was able to pick whether he wanted the flower to reproduce itself or to reproduce with another plant. Okay, and the last reason that Mendel chose pea plants is that there are a lot of traits that are very distinguished in these pea plants, and these are a few of them. So these traits would later be known as Mendelian inheritance. Okay, that's not the most common form of inheritance, but for Mendel, it played a really big role. Basically, what this means is that these are controlled by two alleles, and those two alleles are either dominant or recessive. So it's a very classic type of inheritance. So these were some of the things that he was looking at. He was looking at the shape of the seed. Were they round or were they wrinkled? He was looking at the colors of the seed. Were they yellow or were they green? He was looking at the color of the flowers. Were they purple or white? He was looking at the form of the pea pods. They'll either be full or they'll be wrinkly and constricted. He was also tracking the color of the pea pods themselves, so yellow versus green. He was checking where the flowers were placed, so they were either axial, which means they're on the stem all throughout the stem, or were they terminal flowers, which means the flowers are only on the tips of the plants. And then the last thing he was looking at were tall versus short. Okay, and so he's tracking all of these different traits from one generation to the next, and he's keeping track of it in a very mathematical way, and this kind of led to all of the great insights that we're going to talk about as this unit goes on. Today I really just wanted to introduce Mendel, talk about his life, and talk about what he was really researching. So again, he's studying pea plants, and he's tracking these traits from generation to generation, and he's keeping up with them in a journal in a very mathematical way. And that's going to give him a lot of insights that we'll discuss as this unit goes on. So y'all, thank you so much for making it here today. Your teacher has some other work for you to do, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.